Hi, everyone.
Hey,
I'm not stuck at work. I'm not sure how long this is going to go. I might switch over to the phone Zoom if that's okay at some point. Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Otherwise, y'all can just watch me work as this goes on. Hi, everyone.
Okay, we are live on
I'm not
YouTube.
stuck at work.
Okay. I will go ahead and call to order our City of Oxford goal setting session number 2 on August 3rd, 2020. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Southard. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Snavely. Mr. Elliott, will you call the roll to approve the agenda?
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
and Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right. Thanks, everybody. I just wanted to say thanks for giving up another evening for this. Sorry it's taken us so long to get this scheduled with everything else that's going on, but I'm sure we can have a good outcome. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Your Honor. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the City Council follow-up goal setting session. This is a virtual meeting. It does not include public participation, but the public is invited to watch this virtual meeting, which was posted on the city's website. As was stated earlier, the meeting is scheduled to end at 7 p.m. And as you know, our first meeting was held in February 3rd, and a follow-up meeting was scheduled in March, but had to be canceled due to COVID-19. I provided council with an agenda for this evening and a copy of the report from our February 3rd meeting. I hope you had a chance to look at both. In that report, it gave 4 characteristics of high-performing organizations on page 1. And one of the 4 characteristics of a high-performing organization is that they have the capability to adapt to changes in the environment. Well, who could have fathomed in February that in a month, the city would be dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, the resulting economic downturn, and the issues surrounding Black Lives Matter. So these 3 changes have forced the city to change course. They've added new responsibilities, projects, and requirements for city staff, including the gift card program, the new CDBG interest-free loan program for the retention of jobs, the implementation of our DORA, face mask ordinance, amending personnel policies to comply with federal and state COVID-19 requirements, and ensuring that our businesses are complying with similar requirements, all adding a greatly increased burden of responsibility to existing city staff. So I just want to take a minute to congratulate and give thanks to all city staff who I believe have met these challenges and never cease to amaze me. So thanks for your hard work and dedication to serving and protecting the public. So I had asked Ryan Chasey of HPG Network to once again facilitate this session. He informed us early this afternoon that a family health emergency prevented him from doing this. So we have this evening Heather and possibly Joy, both with HPG Network, joining us and taking over for Ryan. We also have department heads, as you know, and our attorney, Ben Mazer, with us tonight, primarily to observe and answer any questions that City Council might have. And of course, Jessica is hosting this virtual meeting, so you'll need to follow past protocol when you wish to speak or ask questions, and she'll turn your microphone on, or you can do that yourself. So anyway, I look forward to a productive meeting this evening. And with that, I shall turn it over to Heather.
Well, good evening, everyone. And I shared earlier that Ryan sends his apologies for not being able to be here tonight. He most certainly planned on and was going to do this. I know this because today was really the first interaction I've had with what's been going on. And luckily, I mean, the good thing is I got to be with you back in February, and I was a little bummed that I wouldn't get to be a part of this because of some other things we had going on, but happy to pick up where we left off. And with that, I guess maybe, I guess I can see most of you on my screen, but we put together some slides to sort of walk through the rest of the goal setting and then conclude with another tool. I know last time we sort of ended with a good tool, but just to kind of open up, the objectives for tonight are really the council members will have the opportunity to share their project ideas that fit into the city's top 5 performance objectives. And we're going to review what we did at the last session, since I know I've slept a few times since then. And as Doug just mentioned, there's a lot of things that have happened since February. And then council members will agree on 3 ideas that department heads will work to incorporate into their existing goals and work plan. So those are the 2 objectives for this session. Just want to make sure before we get started to just to say this, like our in-person session, is really designed for you and to make sure that I, as your facilitator, am helping walk you to a particular point. This should be completely open for conversation as we go. So if I'm going too fast, please stop me. Or if there are questions that we need to talk about, let's do that along the way. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. I actually think that Joy may be trying to, she's.
Good afternoon. I just found it. It was in a text, not an email. So my apologies. I am here and I'm looking forward to a great meeting. Thank you, Heather.
Yeah, hi, Joy.
Hi.
Okay, so let's get into this. So the process we want to use this evening, online, we do a lot of work. Well, actually, Sam is in our Ball State University Certified Public Managers program, and we have always done that in person. We've had to switch to an online format, so we have some experience with this, and I'm sure you've been meeting this way. But the process that we're going to use, being on Zoom, we're going to review the outcomes from last session with some slides like we would in person. We're going to do some brainstorming of your ideas, and as we do that, I'm going to actually take notes and then kind of come back and discuss some of those things. And then we'll discuss how we could prioritize those and some things to consider, and then select those 3 project ideas in the context of a thought framework we'd like to share with you tonight. So let's look at that council staff retreat that we held back in February. So we came up with, if you remember the value cards exercise, everyone was asked to go through this little exercise where we came up with some common values, and we wrote them all up on a board and sort of checked off the ones that we heard a lot of. But here's the list that came out of that. We know that, our values are what kind of line us up with where we're headed. And if we're going to be really engaged, it's what we're doing is going to line up with our values. So efficiency, resiliency, as you can see there, diversity, equity, and inclusion, we kind of put that all together. Equity and justice, vibrant, celebrating the arts, creativity, innovation, and then taking care of the vulnerable first. So those were the values that really were going to be, we knew then were going to be expressed through that conversation. So the vision statement, what we did was we then kind of took a step back and looked back at the vision statement. Oxford will be a university community with a sustainable, high quality of life, providing excellent municipal services while maintaining its rural and historic character. And so with that vision statement in mind, we sort of had a conversation about what that felt like and what we thought about it. And so some of the things, again, these are in your notes, but comments that were made, that it felt like it was for all of us. How sustainable do we want to become was a question that sort of arose. The fluidity of a university community, and fluidity is, to put it lightly, in the context where we're in. The economic viability, thoughts of community, thoughts of a caring, warm community, and the small town character. All of those things are what came from our review of the vision statement back in February. So then we started talking about how do we go from vision to action? Because one of the things that we knew, coming into the conversation, we did a survey of everyone, and 14 individuals completed the survey and revealed that, well, number one, 100% of respondents felt they were successful in completing the 2019 goals, which was awesome. But we didn't have any uniform way to track or report those goals. And more than half of the respondents did not feel that council goals, department goals, and individual work plans were aligned. And then to go along with that, 100% of respondents felt that we wanted to make sure that we aligned those goals, the council goals and departmental goals. And so as we look at that, knowing with those things in mind, I think it's looking at how that ties in from vision to action was something we talked about, and I want to sort of emphasize here. So when we talk about these high level goals, I'm going to put this into context in a moment. The goals should flow from on high, so to speak. So we have our strategic plans. Those goals tie into departmental objectives, which then flow into processes that are tasks that we do, made up of tasks that we do. Or to put it the other way, the things I do as an employee every day, the tasks, should be a part of processes that are actually designed to point towards those objectives we're trying to achieve as an enterprise that then help us to hit those goals. And an example of that is, here's how this kind of unfolds in a community. So when I drive through a neighborhood as part of the police patrols process, I'm doing that for improved visibility and crime deterrence. And that's part of our overall goal as a community of customer satisfaction and improved public safety, for instance. Similarly, maybe if I want to, we'll take it back the other way. Let's say safety improvements are a high priority in our community. Part of our, let's say we want to say we're a safe community. Well, in my department, we want timely repairs as part of our street maintenance process, and my job is to fill potholes. So I understand, as someone who fills potholes every day, how my job actually ties to being a safe community. And so then the last one, again, if I'm filing records, might not seem like that much fun, but when I realize it's part of the records retention process that results in retrievable records, that is part of our overarching goal of transparency, I realize I have a very important job. And so tying those things together is really, understanding how those tie together is really part and parcel to addressing those issues of, well, we achieved all of our goals, and maybe there are ways that we think we can improve our ability to tie those daily tasks and processes to the overarching goals that are related to the council. So then we got into success indicators. So if you're successful at doing your mission, what will that look like, council? How could you measure it or otherwise demonstrate that achievement to others? And so that really went into a conversation where we listed out all of these performance objectives, and these top 5 were the ones that were selected by the group. So economic development, sustainability, housing for everyone, town and gown relations, and excellent services. So I'm going to stop there for just a second. This is what we did back then. Hopefully everybody remembers all of this, but just want to hear any comments or any thoughts anyone has on it.
Yeah, I was, may I speak?
Yeah, yes, thank you.
I was thinking that of the fact that we've had these crises, and so often in life, the urgent pushes out the important. And right now, that's been the case. The urgent has pushed out in many ways, the important, but the important work just seems to continue well. But should we, as we are working through this, should we be looking at some of the goals in terms of the urgent action and successful action, like, for instance, the collaboration with the university, with the hospital and the health department, which we have never we never realized that that was going to be so important. And with the schools, so should we be reevaluating this whole thing, all these performance objectives, in relation to the urgent activities that have occurred? And if so, I was thinking about the various priorities that citizens have kind of expressed. So I'll stop there, but I want to start with that question.
First, as your facilitator, absolutely, you are spot on in that just as our values change, yes, our performance objectives should be looked at through that lens. And I'm not suggesting you abandon any, but your ability to take what you just described, we've learned new things, and get into the planning mode as opposed to urgent and important activities, the things that you have to do, because if we don't, things fall apart. But getting into that planning mode of, we're going to anticipate that the more time we spend doing what we're doing tonight for those issues, the less often we're going to be in the urgent and important mode. We want to stay in the planning mode more fully so that we can head off future urgencies. So I'll just say that first, but love to hear from others.
Well, and if I could add, I have listed on the report that we issued the last time, many of the projects, objectives that we've accomplished, such as improving resident outreach and communication. I believe we've accomplished that. The DORA was to be implemented. So I'm going to refrain from going through those because I know, this is not our main goal for tonight, is to report on the accomplishments. But part of my reasoning for making the opening comments was just to keep in mind all the new things, as Edna's pointed out, that we've had to address. But I know that there is a desire on council to talk about some other issues, keeping all this in mind. As I've said before, fellow city manager once said, we can do anything you want, but we can't do everything. And, so just keeping that in mind. Thank you.
City councilors, it's hard for me to see you because we're in like a big long line. So if you want to just unmute yourself and speak, if you have something, we can try to be respectful of each other's muting and unmuting.
I'll go ahead and speak up on the issue with COVID and surrounding concerns. I think that should be a parallel goal, or at most maybe remove one of the top 5 and replace it with COVID issues. But I don't want to see that completely get rid of our long-term goals, which we've already sort of had a problem setting up and moving forward with.
Yeah, I completely agree with Jason.
Yeah, I think so too. It's I like the idea of a parallel goal. It's there. I mean, we have to deal with things that are urgent, whether they're our top priorities or not. So I think that goes without saying in many ways. So maybe what we should do is just really focus and drill down into what it is that we want to do. And so maybe look at those 5.
And I also see, I mean, especially saying that it's parallel, it's the same thing, right? It's like housing for everyone. There's going to be a lot of evictions coming up. Sustainability, this is all part of sustainability, economic development. So I see it as not necessarily changing our main goals, but our how important those goals are become that much more important.
So to me, if I could just jump in, like I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think a lot of the things that we're going to face can be encompassed with some of the goals. I mean, I think about our economic future and I worry a lot. So I think we can double down on some of our goals. I guess if I were going to massage these, I think that the idea of social justice just has been, I think that was always a big part of what we talked about. We've been talking about a lot in the context of policing, which we didn't talk much about in our retreat. And maybe social justice comes into sustainability or economic development or housing for everyone. But I do feel like if there's anything that's changed in recent months, it's just a little bit more of an emphasis on that if we could blend that in, I don't think it's a different topic. I just think maybe more emphasis than we were thinking about, or different emphasis in recent months.
Yeah, I think that would fall under excellent services, and I agree we should incorporate that too as well. And I don't think we necessarily need to do pushing out of anything. We could either incorporate it in or run it parallel.
Well, it's a value, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a value
Exactly
that
right.
drives all of our decision making. So if anything, we could just overtly add that to our list of values.
Excellent. Exactly right. It is a value. All right.
I totally agree with everything that you've all said. And I think that one of the things that has come forward is not only the things that you just said, but also that the public really is asking to be kept safe and healthy and informed of best practices. And, working with the businesses as we are doing, this kind of collaboration is all part of economic development, but it's also about safety and security and, addressing issues like systemic racism and all the values that we share, but kind of rolling it all in. But I just thought it was really important to talk about that at the outset of this discussion tonight.
Yes. Just one question on that, because I do think there's another value you might have just mentioned, and I just want to toss it out there. Innovation, or the idea that you're on leading edge of best practices, I'm going to just go back here a little bit to the original values that we had. Let's see. Oops, sorry. Don't mean to make everyone. Okay, so these were the cross-cutting values that we had last time. We do have innovation on there. Okay, so, we do have equity and justice, and we actually have, equities on there twice, but we want to emphasize social justice as well as, sounds like innovation. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, those definitely all go together, including, so when I was thinking of social justice, it encompasses everything we do, but specifically services we provide and how they're done fairly and equally, and reduce chances for things that happened that brought about the protest to begin with, which we don't generally have an issue with in Oxford, but it's definitely something we want to be on the leading edge of. And if we can innovate in terms of policies and procedures and programs, which a lot of that is going around right now and being discussed in council, that would be fantastic.
That's excellent. So as we move through this, what I would suggest is we're going to hold on to innovation and social justice. And I'm going to show you a way that we can actually do exactly what you just said. And in fact, you could infuse it into every one of your tactics if you wanted to. Okay, so let's move down. So these were the top 5. We're going to maintain these as the top 5, knowing that the way that we're going to infuse some of the highlighted values are going to come through this next part of the conversation, essentially. So that's what brings us into this brainstorming piece. So I want to take you back to that slide where I said, okay, look, here's kind of how this shakes out in this context, okay? So let's say your overarching goals are coming out of your vision statement. So you want to be a university community, you want quality of life, excellent services, rural and historic character. The objectives you laid out in our last session were the buttons you're going to press, or the way you're going to measure yourself is in the realm of economic development, sustainability, housing for everyone, excellent services, and town and gown. Those were the ones that showed up as your top 5. Tonight, what we're going to get into are the idea of projects or processes, which is going to then tie back to the teams that are inside the house and the tasks that they do every day in order to implement on the processes necessary for those projects. Does that, because tying it back directly to the team was part of the goal tonight, is to pick those 3 projects, prioritize this. And so one is, I wanted to show you this sort of framework on how these things tie together practically in the workplace. And again, what it does is it infuses a level of engagement among team members that know that the daily tasks that they're doing actually hit those high goals that you have as an organization, as a as a community. So let's lay out some ideas, because when we look at things through the lens of, I'm going back here, when we look at, we're looking for projects that we want to undertake, the 2 values we've highlighted are innovation and social justice. And so as we think about the projects that we undertake that would emphasize those values, we're tying back to those objectives of hitting economic development, sustainability, housing for everyone, excellent services, town and gown. So what projects might we want to look at that actually hit some or all of those?
And can I just ask the question? I mean, I'm a planner, so I tend to think of like infrastructure when I hear the word project,
Yes.
that's my bias. But we're talking about, but is changing a procedure also a project? If we're going to say we want to change the budgeting procedure,
Yes.
is that, so does it need to be bricks and mortar, or are we thinking the way we do things is also a project?
Absolutely. And that's a great way. It's when I think of a project, it has a distinct beginning and end. So yes, it could be something like that. And just for the sake of that, I'm going to show you a little bit further forward, because sometimes I'm a planner too, and I like to see where we're going. So we're going to go into prioritization criteria. Once we come up with the list of all the different things we think that should be going on right now, we're going to have to narrow that down to 3. And I don't know if you're familiar with Moore's strategic triangle, but it is an excellent tool for government to help figure out some priorities around this. And so what we'll do is we'll take those things and we'll want to look at them through the lens of, how much opposition or support are we going to see around this? Who's going to need to authorize it? Who is going to be most likely to support it? And then who's going to step out and oppose this idea of ours? And then we'll have an action plan that goes with that. Same thing with operations. We're suggesting this project, but we only have a limited amount of operational capacity. So what might be the major operational issues we need to consider? What are going to create some weaknesses? What are the weaknesses or the problems we're going to encounter trying to implement this operationally from an internal standpoint? And what's our action plan to address that? And then finally, policy. We just were talking about that. So what public value do we see? What are the benefits to the public? What are they going to see? What are the costs if we do something, if we do this thing? And then any conflicts that might be with other policies in our addressing that. And there's an action plan with that. So for each of those projects that we would pick, we're going to want to look at it through that lens. And then I'll leave you with, once we're done with this, I'll leave you with a set of questions that you can use that goes with that you can use to actually dig in a little bit more deeply. So that's kind of how tonight will flow out to kind of get you to that fine point. We want to keep bringing you to that fine point so you can actually get the connection made that you want to make. So I'll stop again. Questions, comments, thoughts?
Well, I'd like us to get started and
Good.
move forward. And I was thinking in terms of housing for everybody. At least a couple of things have come up that we ought to have on our radar and put up there as tasks. And one of them is having, the Housing Advisory Commission came up with an idea of in lieu of fees by developers or developers including affordable housing in their developments. So I think that's one that I'd like to bring forward. And the other one that we should be looking at is we're going to be discussing the transient guest lodging. And if there's the potential for modest lodging tax associated with that, it could go to that funding as well. So maybe you could wrap it up into identify funding mechanisms for affordable housing.
Nice. Identify funding mechanisms for affordable housing. That's beautiful. Okay.
And in that same vein, I would love it if we could look more into providing potentially short-term or at least cold shelter. We do have a homeless population that needs to be addressed, and I think that's something we should strongly look into.
All right. Let's,
we
I'm
have
gonna actually
probably
write in
more-
here real quick.
We're probably going to have more homeless people if evictions go forward, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And we should also be looking into eviction processes, although we have limited control there, and also rental assistance and all the other things that are to come with sustained responses to COVID.
Along that same vein, there's a lot of people who live in their cars and they're not necessarily, without any shelter. I think something some other cities are looking at is providing a parking space for people who are living in their cars along with porta potties. I think that's something that would be relatively low cost and could be helpful for a certain population. Do you want to stay on the affordable housing?
Well, I'm hearing lots of affordable housing thoughts and ideas, and maybe that's going to be because we're going to pick three. And I'll just keep taking notes here, and I may just have to keep, but I'd like for you to be able to see it. Can you see it okay? Okay, awesome.
Hey,
All right.
sir, I have a quick clarification question. Are we developing 3 points for each goal, or is it 3 period?
It's 3 strategic projects, and so we can I like identify funding mechanisms for affordable housing as a project that feels like there's a distinct beginning and end. Some of the things that are falling in under that, maybe those tools could provide parking spaces and porta potties, the funding mechanisms, and we'd have to explore the ideas behind cold shelter, but sustained responses to COVID-19 for affordable housing. So these pieces are all sounding a part of a similar project to me.
I totally agree. And are we talking about 3 projects for just the affordable housing piece, or 3 projects, period?
And I want to make sure that I go back to the leadership, but I believe it's 3 projects.
So
Out of all 5 of our values.
and this is, can I also ask a question about what our
No need
time
to
horizon
limit
is?
ourselves.
Because that will help me scale this. Are we talking about things we want to accomplish in the remainder of 2020? Then I can imagine 3 discrete little things. Are we thinking maybe things that might take us a year to accomplish? So yeah, what's the time horizon? That helps me scale the ideas.
I think Dave asked a very important question right there. And I think these are really, I think we should view these, especially since it's now August, as goals for the 2-year period.
Okay.
And to that extent, I think it's okay for us to have more than just 3 things if we see multiple things that we want to do. And I think it's okay to have more than 3. I just, at the beginning, didn't want to have a list of 24 goals.
Yeah.
Well, we've narrowed it down to 5, so that's good. And we've got the values, that's good. So, I think we should identify those projects, David. So I agree with you in your concern.
And I'm a project person, so I love to, I think about the Amtrak stop, and that's a discrete thing. I guess I would back out at the higher scale. To me, it remains a project to tighten the loop between our goal setting, like that diagram from goal to tactic to task and the reporting. So this is what I would just say. It would be a project for me to have a transparent system so citizens knew what our goals were. Those goals drove our budgeting process. So we had a budgeting process that was really sensitive to that. And then, at the beginning of each year, we report on what we had accomplished, not just things, but like, I guess here's a project. I would love us to have a dashboard of indicators of our progress on these goals. Number of homeless people, GHG emissions, whatever those things. I mean, that to me is like, it's one project to transform our decision making that then plays out in all these different things. So that just to me is a project I'd like to see. It's a little more encompassing, but that we really are data driven, and that there are indicators, that we have a system of indicators that we report. So that to me is a dashboard that I'd love to see us do.
I'm going to put that on here.
So then we know when we've moved the needle on something is my thing. I mean, I can always point to a project that I've created, but what's moved the needle on the indicators? I'm not sure we are always tracking those to know what they are and how much progress we've made, where the trend lines are going.
Just having spent some time back in February with everyone, with the department heads, I guess one of the distinctions you'll want to make is which ones involved, because this was part of the budgeting process kind of leading into that. So which ones of these will affect staff versus which ones will not necessarily affect staff. And I think, and I just want to make sure as I understood it from Ryan, that we were going to pick 3 that would affect staff. And so I just want to make sure that that is correct. So maybe with Doug.
Yeah, that was my hope. I mean, we have a lot of great ideas, and I know council, I'm sure, gets frustrated with me reminding them, but as a manager, I like to stretch staff, but I only have so many staff to stretch. And we are still working on many of the projects. I mean, such as the Oats Trail is a major project for engineering, is a major project for the assistant city manager doing applying for grants. And, we're doing all these new programs. So, I want to give council the opportunity, but, we'll do the best we can with the resources that we have. And this funding mechanism for affordable housing, Bill mentioned the short-term rentals, but of course, as we all know, without any events, that'll be difficult to raise sufficient revenue in the short term. I think we all recognize that. Hopefully events will pick up before the end of the year or after the new year, and we could see some revenue happening there. But that's my goal, because we have a lot of core responsibilities. Police have been at the forefront of new ideas, and we're trying to respond to those responsibly. But it's that's my goal, is to focus it. But I think this notion that we can have a longer term on some of these goals is fine too. I mean, I work for city council, and I guess I'm at the point where maybe we should talk about zero-sum budgeting, where we go back and throw programs out that we've been doing for a while because they no longer have a priority. And, maybe we should do that. And then we can reallocate resources to some of these new goals. But, tonight is for council to come up with their ideas. And if they want to do more than 3, then let's hear it. And we can talk about how we can possibly accomplish that. And maybe it's not just the city organization. Maybe we budget money to other organizations, cutting back on some of our existing programs to help fund them.
Well, if I could just pick up on what Doug's saying, is that when I look back at our goals, it was at a time when we felt like we could build from a position of strength to add new things. And unless I'm mistaken, I think we're going to be making some really tough choices about what may have to be subtracted in the future. And so I think in part it's about thinking of new projects we want to take on, but I think I would also love to have this session guide us when we have to weigh, like Doug's saying, some really tough trade-offs. I want those to be guided by our goals. So it may be that we can pursue something new while taking something away. So yeah, I guess it's just not additive. It may be helping us make tough choices on the subtractive side too.
Well, in that regard, may I say that, we have talked about the economic vitality of our community, and we've had a number of ideas about how to do this, but several ideas are ones that continue work that has already been done and build on work that's already been done. For example, I think we all agree that we want to preserve the historic character of Oxford. And so it's very important that HAPC continue their work in historic preservation and also in educating the public about the value of historic buildings. And that brings people to our town, just as the Oats Trail does too. And so that's one reason we want to have more public art, and why we want to have more public art that expresses some of our values, that continues our collective memory work, that expresses some of the values that we all share. And I mean, when I talk about memory work, I'm talking about, well, like the excellent Black History tour that was developed with Enjoy Oxford. That's an example of the kind of education and the memory work that there's an ongoing value that we espouse, but that we continue work on. So not every new idea is actually, some of the new ideas or some of the project ideas are actually good continuations of work that has been started.
Heather, if I may.
Yeah.
I have someone sent me a text. If we could, I don't know if you want to maybe think about how to phrase it. If you'd be willing to maybe ask each counselor to share maybe their top project ideas or to try to summarize them, and then maybe we can narrow, or just make sure we call on each person. I don't know, it's just
Excellent.
because we've turned off our chat feature, and it is with this vertical alignment, it's hard for me to see.
It is hard for me to, okay. So let's just do this for a second. So we are, number one, when we look at what your performance objectives, these are not actual objectives yet, right? What economic development means is something completely different. All the notes that we made in the last section or in the last session, everyone had lots of different things they thought about when it came to looking at those. So with these in mind, let's take a minute, just I don't know if you're sitting at a desk or whatever, you want to write it down, but just take a minute and think about what Jessica just said. Under any or all of these, what are your top, let's each pick 3 projects you would like to see that you think can most impact our ability to be sustainable, or hit the economic development one. So it could be something that hits all of them. It may only hit one of them, but let's come up with 3, and then we'll go around the table, so to speak.
Heather, do you want to take a few minutes on this, or
Yeah, I thought can we just do 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes? Will that be enough?
Sure, let's try it.
Yeah, okay.
And then what I'll do is I'll just maybe go just down the line and call on each person. Would that help you?
Yes, it would.
I wanted to mention that if people don't want to see the little strip, you can hit the grid video option at the very top of your list, and then you can go back to seeing everybody.
So I wouldn't mind chiming in general on economic development. Given COVID, I think that's totally changed. It's not so much development now as trying to sustain the economic situation that we have and prevent it from getting worse. And that mostly ties into helping our businesses in some of the ways we have, but also making sure the most vulnerable are able to meet their basic needs and then continue acting as consumers and not fall to the wayside. So things like rental assistance, food assistance, really basic stuff. I feel like that as a goal has dramatically shifted.
Mhm.
All right, it is 4:49. It's been 2 minutes. So if you feel like you're ready to share some goals, go ahead and raise your hand, and then I'll call you and just make sure we hit everyone and give them a chance to speak. All right, Glenn, go ahead.
Thank you, Jessica. First one happened this year. I want to talk about innovative police and community relations. I don't know if you want me to put bullet points underneath that particular project. I can if you would like for me to. The second one is going to be concurrent with what we already discussed, and that is innovative funding solutions for diverse housing in Oxford. And I can also put bullet points underneath that one. And then finally, sustaining the economic health of the city.
Thank you, Glenn. Bill?
Sure. I want to support Glenn's suggestion on the innovative funding for diverse housing. I would also suggest we have a goal of, call it COVID action, coordinated with Miami University. This is something that is urgent now and is probably going to maintain its urgency over the next year as we figure out what happens. And the third one for me is solar, and I'd like to see us just at least get a possibility of a project within the next year or so to get moving on some sort of a solar project.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm looking, Chantel, go ahead.
I'm gonna try to get away from my coworker. Okay, I think the first one, I definitely agree with what David had said as far as we need to be as transparent as possible with the way that we allocate funds, and we should have benchmarks. I think something that would be really easy to implement would be on any staff request or council request, it should have an additional, that paper that we fill out, we get in our packet, it should have on there, how does this apply to sustainability, or how does this apply to equity and diversity? And that way, every single thing that we're requesting, we have those important values in mind, and it's written out on paper. If it doesn't apply to equity or sustainability, then that should impact our decision if we go forward or not. So that's the first one. The other thing would be, as far as following up with what Bill said, that and thinking about what are very cheap projects we can do during this time where maybe we don't have a lot of free funds, I definitely would love to have a Solarize Oxford plan to go out. So that would be something that would have very minimal cost to the city itself. It would be all on homeowners. That basically the city would accept bids for different solar companies and see who would provide what we were looking for, so that homeowners can get a discounted rate to apply solar panels to their home. And as far as what you said earlier about, I like that thinking about, okay, what's the opposition for each goal and project, and then also which pillars does it fall under. And for me, sustainability, I mean, it's very obvious it falls under environmental sustainability, but it's also about economic development and attraction of what makes Oxford an even better place that people might want to live in and move to. So that would be a really good solar project that would have very little funding on the city's behalf. Probably the only thing we would need would be staff time to get the bids and review them and accept them, and then marketing going forward. And then also following up on Doug's idea about the solar array on the landfill, that would be fantastic, especially if you have a very cheap way to get that done. Do it, Doug. And then the last thing would be methane reduction. Mike had said this before, you know, we see that our greenhouse emissions, a lot is coming from the closed landfill. And so not only the closed landfill, but we have to keep in mind that that trash is ongoing. So whenever we produce organic waste to Rumpke's landfill, we're producing methane as well. So looking at from the data that we have, how do we reduce food waste as much as possible, whether that's rescuing food or expanding our composting program. And then on that same vein, for trash reduction, this is something that has no opposition whatsoever. Everyone hates how trashy move out is, and that it's insane to use a mattress for a year and then throw it away. So I am totally in support of the things that Sam was talking about the last meeting, about where are the barriers in our code so that we can actually look at trying to reduce trash, especially when it comes to a transient population like the students moving out. That's it.
Thank you, Chantel. Edna or Jason or Mayor Smith? Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, my goals are subsumed in the ones that were already mentioned. Innovative police and community relations, innovative housing, including shelter, and sort of under that, meeting the basic needs of the most vulnerable. So basic needs assistance in terms of food, shelter, things like that. And yeah, sustainability, particularly renewable energy and solar. And I would like to see solar as big as we can possibly make it. I think there's economies of scale, and that I think it helps with economic sustainability long term. The more we invest in that now, moving forward. And let me know if you need me to repeat anything. I know I threw a lot at you very quickly.
Did you get that, Heather?
Well, I was going to say, you said that the first two were tied to the ones I just added, including shelter and basic needs to diverse housing.
That's
And then-
fantastic.
Okay. And then, and I'm hearing, I mean, there's starting to be common themes here. And so I just added solar here. Identifying inexpensive projects that can be done during this time to do more with solar. Maybe I'll just, these examples, is it helpful to have the examples in here? I can leave them in. Whatever. Okay.
I think it can be helpful to have those little sub points.
Okay.
Especially around the nuances of solar. You know, I know things might be tough economically, budget wise, but I think the more we invest now, the better, as long as we plan it out well. And I would love to see us look at all the open space we have in our different city-owned properties and put that to use.
City-owned reuse of city-owned properties.
So I love the idea of getting homeowners in town discounts so they can do their own solar. And I love small solar projects for our own buildings, but I think we can do much bigger and better than that. And I think economically, we know that works out in the long term. And because of those economies of scale, it will pay off. So I would like to see solar as big as we can possibly do it.
One of the things that I just want to make a note to, just while we're doing this, is I heard when we're talking low cost, this methane reduction project, the food waste, Chantel, what you were saying, it sounds like these are all policies that you might be able to enact. So what's a good differentiation is policies are your work. Some of the other things might be staff work. And so that's a good differentiation in my opinion. And so maybe what we'll do is we'll put more under policies if others have ideas that are related to policies. That helps to differentiate, hey, we're not asking staff to do this work. Okay.
I just wanted to say that I agree with Jason's discussion on solar.
Okay.
Edna, I think I saw your hand. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I would like to add that, we need innovative ways to get people, all people, to live in Oxford and to stay in Oxford. And, we just need to find ways that will bring people here, that will bring creative, encourage creativity, especially creativity, because, if they might as well, we have to find ways to make sure that people want to stay here in Oxford rather than living somewhere else. And that means looking at what makes Oxford unique. As I said, preserving the historic character of the town, working on events. We're doing this, and we need to continue to do this, and we need to continue to invest in this, in encouraging art and creative activities that bring creative people here and bring people to our town, and bring families here, bring young people, old people of all sorts to live in our community, and that project the message that we are a welcoming community to everybody.
Thank you, Edna. David?
Okay, so it's obviously hard to make choices. To me, I think it's an ongoing project for us, what I'm going to call strategic planning and management. And this is like procedurally how we tighten the connection between goal setting. And we're doing this here. And I think we need to talk about our comprehensive plan, because that's how we engage the public in setting priorities. How we tighten that, when are we going to do that? How do we tighten the decision-making chain? Like what we're going to do today, how does that translate into budgeting and policy making? Like Chantel was saying, like I remember seeing the form that departments have to put together to say this is a budgetary request. Where's the line on there? What's the justification in relation to the comp plan? That's a procedural change that then plays itself out. And again, I think public reporting is part of that. We said, housing is a goal. This is how many new units of non-student housing we completed. So I guess there's a lot in that, but it's one project of how you go from goal setting to tactics in your decision making. And that's us, that's the manager, that's staff. So anyway, that's like a bundle.
Yeah.
My next one I'm going to call infrastructure for sustainable growth. And two things I'm thinking about multimodal transportation. So how to get people get to and from and across Oxford, and I'll call it utility scale solar. As bad as COVID is, it's possible there is going to be stimulus dollars for infrastructure that we can go after in the next year. So if we could go big on solar or Amtrak or multimodal, I think we should. And that's probably three already, but I guess I would build on what Edna was saying. Is I was thinking about diversity and vibrancy and what I call this economy and community beyond Miami. The semester in COVID has made me realize how vulnerable we are to depend on one employer for our livelihood. And we got to diversify our base so that we don't live and die based on Miami's utility purchases. And, so I think this comes back to Edna's point, how do we become a place that people want to live, whether or not they're associated with Miami, that they want to open up a business, whether or not they're college students here. So anyway, those are my three: strategic planning and management, infrastructure for sustainable growth, and diversity and vibrancy. So thank you.
Thank you, David. And last but not least, Mayor Smith.
No problem. Happy to go last. Everybody, it's amazing how my three choices now are almost completely different than they would have been in March. But really good discussion, and everybody has hit a lot of mine already, such as the very first one that Glenn suggested, looking at our policing procedures. Probably have to go back through that. And also, I had housing on my list, whether it's looking at comprehensively at our housing problem or specifically at what we do with our homeless problem. Either way, I'm good with. And lastly, I think in terms of economic development, we may have to, and I'm adding this to the list, we may have to look at another stimulus package if the pandemic goes on much longer. And I know how much time it took the first time. I don't think we want to do another 20,000 gift cards. Perhaps there will be, again, some federal money to replace whatever we might spend on another stimulus package.
This was great. Thank you, Jessica. It was an excellent suggestion. Okay, so we've, I don't know that if there are any that you feel like I put an extra bullet in there, but it really could have been combined with something else. But just to kind of review this, we have affordable housing I'm just going to say the high level. This dashboard of KPIs, I almost feel like that does go with the strategic planning and management. Is that safe to say? All right, I'm going to, since this was my word, okay. So zero-based budgeting to free up resources for new programs, innovative in police and community relations. So then we have diverse housing. Okay, we've got two. You feel like one's more encompassing than the other? We have this.
So Heather.
Yeah.
So I'm on the HAC, and diverse housing also includes affordable housing, but it also includes like senior housing, transient housing, other kinds of housing, not just affordable.
So what I can do is kind of like we did on some of these others. Okay. 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 Sustaining the economic health of the city. COVID-19 action coordinated with Miami University, something a little more urgent. Start at least one solar project. I think that could go with our other solar. Transparent process for funding allocations, making sure that to include outcomes on budget requests. Again, that may tie with strategic planning. I'm hopefully trying to make it easier to pick three. Okay, so solar is another project. And then, and then just creating new policies around these items, some specific items. And then innovative ways to get people to live in Oxford, preserving historic character. strategic planning and management, and then infrastructure for sustainable growth, diversity and vibrancy, and looking at another stimulus package. So, I mean, pretty broad list of projects that we're looking at. Any others that you see that could maybe be put together?
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think you could put in maybe a general notion of a COVID response, and then you've got a couple of them that are related to that.
Okay. All right. And that means I'll can get
So you've
this
got-
one.
Yeah. COVID-19 action coordinated with Miami University.
Okay. Thank you. That's, let's see.
And also there was the mayor talked about the stimulus package. There it is.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. All right. Yeah. So some budgeting changes, COVID-19 response, police and community relations, housing and shelter, economic health of the city. I wonder if that maybe could go. Yeah, guess maybe they're all, I mean, diversity and vibrancy might, I don't know, would that? Okay. So if this is our list, what we need to start looking at then is to start prioritizing those ideas, and we'll come back to them here in a second. And as I said earlier, there are some really there are a lot of great tools out there to help with this. I'm so glad to hear you're doing a comprehensive plan, because a lot of what we're talking about when we look out 5 years or more, that needs to fall into a nice comprehensive plan that then can come down and actually give us a foundation on which we can build everything else. When we get into budgeting conversations, it'll be a lot easier to have some of that, the strategic operations piece of this, which is what I would consider the internal plan. So comp plan being the external, having 3 projects that the staff are going to be working on that you've chosen. That is an internal, what I would call strategic operations plan. When we look at these, where this time and talent can be spent from that standpoint to get those 3 projects, here are some things, like I say, to think about, and ways that you can sort of process through each one of those in terms of, how much support or opposition, again, that we might have. Who needs to authorize it? We've talked about some policies. So you as the council will be able to, these might be just go and do's if there's no operational capacity, let's say, that's needed in order to implement the policy. And then if the public is by and large in support of it. So if that makes sense, that's why I sort of classified that differently. Other projects that were chosen, again, looking at whether there would be opposition or support, and the authorizing environment, but then looking at, okay, is it going to take for staff to be able to implement that? And how's the community going to feel about that in terms of this is where their tax dollars will be spent on a day-to-day basis. And so then creating the action plans off of that to say, okay, we know that this is going to be an issue. These are the 3 things we're going to do in order to mitigate that as a leadership core to make sure that we can implement these things. So that's sort of, like I say, a nice tool. I don't know if you've ever used anything like this before, but let's kind of get into a discussion about the top 3 ideas that you think staff could work into their work plans to start implementing against some of these objectives. And again, I'll go back to the actual project ideas for discussion.
I guess if you want to speak, raise your hand and I'll look for you. Just give me a minute. All right, David, go ahead.
So this is a drum I've been beating on for a number of years. I guess the word I'm thinking of right now is investment. You know, like we're going to have limited dollars and limited time. So what do we invest in that's going to yield us returns, whether it's sustainability, inclusiveness? And that leads me to the budget process. And that's why I asked we do this now, because what I want to know, for example, is, you know, from a staff point of view, as a counselor, I've never entirely understood why the things in the budget are there. I mean, I understand some things are because of their ongoing operational needs, but that's where I would really like to have this conversation parlay directly. We've got limited dollars. We really need to invest in housing, you know, and so that's a specific thing that I would really love us to see even this fall. So it's clear to me that the tax dollars are being invested in sustainability, in diversity, in economic development. So I've kind of lost the train of thought, but to me, that's really a mechanical thing that I would love to see in the process that we're doing up ahead. So I or anybody in the public can trace, like, okay, they said housing was important. Okay, this money is, we're now creating a line from CDBG money that's going to go into housing, that's going to translate into this. So anyway, I think I've lost my train of thought, but you get the idea. That then we can then report to people next year, you said to us housing was important, and here's the result. And I think we're doing that, but just tie it all together.
So just to follow up on that, so this idea of amending the existing budgeting process, let's just put it under a bigger heading. Maybe you're not going to go all the way to zero based and make every department head have zero until they prove it, which is what I'm used to seeing if under that kind of an approach. But what you're saying is, one thing you'd like to see is for the budgets that when they come before you to be able to speak to the strategic objectives. So, and so I'm going to say, I just want to make sure I get this right. You want that as a project itself, or are you saying, let's just do that as a go and do?
I don't know. And I think we're going to continue to do scattershot things until we have a mentality that really ties all these things together. And then that will, anyway, so I think that is a project. I think it's going to changing the departmental budget request forms. It may take some change into personnel evaluation. I mean, so I don't know whether, but it's a culture that I think we can continue to work on.
It is a project in the sense that there are things that we have to do, but I don't want it to be one of our top 3 projects. It's really more of a facilitator to make sure that we do all of those projects.
So I'm going to actually stick that on normally a parking lot is something that you're going to come back to later. I'm going to put it there, but knowing that this sounds like something that's probably going to get taken, action will be taken on it as a result of the conversation. Okay, so amend existing budget documents, and tell me if I'm saying anything wrong, to allow requesters to justify budget requests according.
And while you're typing, I'm going to say this because it's not just about staff. This is going to be, if I want to propose legislation to council, if we're going to spend time in council talking about something, it should be in relation to the goals that we all agreed upon. And that way, I think it's just an idea that it'll keep us focused, because we can bounce in the budget and legislation, we can bounce all over the place. So I think just having those true North Stars and that we enforce it upon ourselves, I think would be.
And if I could just comment, David had a lot of information there, but so much of our existing budget is focused on housing now. For example, police, they're protecting property, streets, they're plowing snow, maintaining the roads. We provide water and sewer. Fire, of course, protects property value, so on and so forth. So we're already doing a lot of things that indirectly affect housing. But I think, what we're talking about is other types of housing for the less fortunate and so on and so forth. Because as we all know, here in Oxford, 70% of our housing is rental. Probably less than that now when we see the census. So, I just wanted to throw that out, that so much of our core is focused on housing. And of course, a lot of that is the rental housing. So, I just think it's useful to keep that in mind when we talk about the existing budget and who it's serving, if you will.
That's good. Do you have a mapped out existing housing system at all?
What do you mean by that, Heather?
Well, when I think about the delivery system for housing, typically in community development, you might see a housing development organization. And I don't know if there's a housing, that might be something. I'm facilitating the conversation. I just wondered if that's anything that you've looked at, is what is your housing delivery system in the context of what you just said, Doug, and that, there are going to be shelters in that system. There are nonprofit housing developers, there's for-profit housing developers, there's lots of different pieces to that. And I'm happy to follow up with you and share my thoughts on that and give you some tools that I have, but that may be a way to start getting your arms around how to
We've
shape
talked
that.
about many of those things. We have a housing advisory commission, but we don't have a housing authority here. We're a very small community. We are developing, we have an RFP out, and one of the things we're asking whoever is interested in it is to look at other ideas for housing. We included the charrette with the RFP so that they keep in mind other housing options. So, we're looking to do that on some land that we own, and hopefully we'll get some good projects with that RFP.
That's awesome.
I saw, Bill, I saw your hand up earlier. Did other people have feedback they wanted to share? I'm looking down, hold me to check on Chantel. Chantel does. Hold on. Go ahead, Chantel.
Yeah, I think to follow up on what Doug said, you can say that all these things are playing into housing and, we're doing all these things already, but, I wouldn't so much look at it as like we're only trying to help the people that are less fortunate, which we are, but we're looking to make sure that we are helping all parts of our population so that people who are visiting professors have a place to rent, people who are staff at Miami have a place to rent. Oxford is really good if you can afford a $200,000 house, but if you're in that in-between population, it makes it really challenging. So what can we do to make it so that people who work in Oxford can actually live here so that we can actually have a year-round population that supports our small businesses?
Okay, that's awesome. So I'm making this slide here, and Jessica, I'll keep watching you as you're watching for hands, but I'm writing up criteria as we try to come to a conclusion on what the top 3 are. I've heard so far, what's the ROI on that investment? And does it achieve one or more of the strategic objectives that we've laid out? And does this ensure all parts of the population are included in the scope or at least considered?
Go ahead, Glenn.
Thank you, Jessica. I wanted to reiterate the importance of return on investment this year. So like this particular cycle of this process, we definitely need to be worried about return on investment on what we do this year and the following year. We already know that the income for the city has reduced, and we need to come up with ways to replenish that. Now, there's one more piece to this investment and return on investment criteria that I want to add, and that is social capital. because this year is another one of those years where a lot of individuals have been worried about government and their dealings with the people. So I just want to make sure that we consider both economic and social capital when we're discussing the things that we want to do regarding return on investment.
Awesome. Okay. We're starting to shape up a very fine filter here for these projects, I'll tell you. Anything else?
I'm looking, hold on. I do not see other hands raised.
Should,
Sorry, Edna, go ahead.
should we not make sure that all stakeholders are included in our discussions? I don't know how you would phrase this, but for instance, the business community, the social services, the university, any other businesses that might be attracted to come to Oxford, the visitors who might come and use the Oates Trail, for instance, the transit population, the student population. There are a lot of, even though we're a small community, we have a lot of varied groups. And should we not be considering that they all be included, whether it's school children, whether it's senior citizens, university students, but like, it seems to me that all those people should somehow be part of our considerations.
And I said extent to which, and so maybe as you're measuring each of these projects against these measuring sticks, some may not involve everyone, but they involve more than another. So we're getting ROI, and in the projects that replace lost revenues might be better than the ones who actually bring nothing. Projects that increase social capital or create social capital might not replace lost revenues, but because it creates social capital, it gets higher. Same thing with it. Maybe it achieves one in one case, but more in another. Now, I don't know how you're going to, in terms of like, we could take this if there's no one else, and we could actually weight these if you wanted to. So do you want to say that one of these 4 criteria is actually should be weighted more heavily than the others? Or are they all on equal footing when we have this discussion?
I mean, I think we could generally prioritize, but I'm not sure, because it's not really comparing apples to oranges. Some things have return on investment that you can actually measure. Other things are far more vague outcomes. Even when you try to measure them, it's not something you can necessarily compare to some other goal.
Mm-hmm.
If I could just clarify, when I say return on investment, I mean in a really broad sense.
Okay.
So I think, for example, an investment in solar, utility scale solar might cost a lot of money, but it would have maybe some literal return on investment. But the other return would be we have diminished carbon emissions. Maybe electricity bills are cheaper for utilities who can then locate here and start up businesses. So to me, it's just like, I don't want to get boxed into a fiscal sense of it. I just want to think about things that are investments, and they may not, we don't need to weight them, but I can think, for example, like solar hits on a lot of things simultaneously, so which things, if we're going to invest in them, might hit on as many of our criteria at once? Like, I'm big on transportation. I hope that we keep pressing forward on multimodal and Amtrak, because that'd be an easy thing to cut in a difficult time. But let's say a really big portion of our emissions are in cars, and we can get away from cars. And if we can connect Oxford to other places, we can make our town more attractive to businesses and residents that want to locate here. Like, you can imagine things hitting on multiple things simultaneously. And the more things they hit, the better investment it's going to be. Anyway.
That makes sense. And so it's having that discussion as part of it's going to probably be key here. So I'm kind of sticking them into a spreadsheet here so that we can kind of look at them side by side for a second here. Certainly, if you have other comments, I'll try to type fast and read fast here.
Can I add that, as we talk about solar, could we maybe think in larger terms of alternate sources of energy, not just solar? After all, I'm looking out the window. We do not live in the Sun Belt here. We live in the Miasma Valley, where we've got lots and lots of rain all the time, and I don't think we should box ourselves into solar. In a few years, that may seem really not as intelligent as we thought now. There may be other ways that we should be thinking about alternate forms of energy. Not that I'm not opposed to solar. Of course, I am in favor of it. I'm just giving us a broader range of looking at things, and to echo kind of what David has said, the multimodal transportation, transportation that is group transportation, the buses and trains and other ways that we can move populations or individuals are all ways that both attract business, but they also are good for the environment. And their way, that has many benefits. So, like the Oats Trail is both transportation and it's recreational, and it's an attraction for so it's got a lot of different benefits. And I think that we should be careful about being too specific when we don't need to be.
I see David nodding. Is everybody okay with that? Just amending that?
Not at all.
You're not okay with
Okay,
that?
Chantel.
All right.
Chantel.
Yeah, to follow up on what Anna said, I mean, there's so many different ways for renewable energy. At first, I was really intrigued by methane capture at the wastewater treatment plant, because we can actually use energy from our waste, and then we could also have our own organic food wasting place so that we don't have to use an outside company, and we could be capturing all of that as energy. I would be very intrigued as to if we were doing, like Jason was saying, as big of a solar project as possible, what would be the cost comparisons between a big project that was methane capture, including wastewater, versus a really big solar. But the reason why solar keeps coming up is that it is the most feasible. I mean, you of all people, you have solar panels on your own house, right? Like, the benefits of it. And so trying to make it so that we can expand that to other people. And that is something that is increasingly becoming more cost effective. So that's why all of us, or at least I'll speak for myself, that's why I have come to the conclusion that solar panels should be our first renewable energy, that it seems to make the most fiscal sense, and technology sense too.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I agree with Edna that there are a lot of opportunities to be more sustainable, and that is definitely the case. But I think we need to identify something specific that we can try to get done in a short period of time. And so I agree with Chantel that I think solar is doable and gettable in the short run.
Awesome.
But if I may, I mean, I think that to the degree it can be data driven, like if we have X number of dollars to invest, which thing will reduce emissions overall the most? And I can guess at sometimes those things, but to the degree that, for example, they can be based on our GHG inventories, so that, like, if I'm going to spend $1, it will get the most return in terms of GHG emissions. And sometimes that's in ways you don't anticipate. It could be methane capture on the landfill. maybe it's more in transportation. So before we go big and invest all our dollars, like I said, I just want it to be guided as much by a pretty thorough analysis that, you know, that money wasn't better invested in something else. I think it could be solar too, but you know, anyway.
That's good.
So
Go ahead, Jason.
I agree with that. So I just wanted to say that monitoring in terms of greenhouse gas emissions is definitely something we should look at, but also the fiscal impact over the long term, which I think will benefit us and not be a cost, but actually will be a gain. And I don't say solar lightly, it's because this is something I've thought a lot about, and it's definitely one of the most feasible and most productive. You know, I've actually done some serious research into wind here, and it's not nearly as feasible. Methane capture, I would love to look into that too. But yeah, I think we need something tangible to set our sights on. And solar, even if we have other projects, will definitely be one of them, I believe. And I say that as an environmental scientist with some background in this area.
But I'd like to say, I have solar panels on my roof. But so I know both the advantages and the disadvantages. And if for instance, somebody needs new windows that are better insulation or new doors, we should not. I would like us to have the flexibility to say that's also an environmental thing and benefit, and has environmental benefit. In other words, you could clearly invest in housing that is energy efficient, or have that as a criterion, and that's not against solar. That's just in addition to, and is another way of looking at it. That's all I'm suggesting.
Sure, that's even something I've specifically looked into myself and changing rules around housing design. And that's something I don't mind exploring as long as we stay focused and produce something tangible. I still lean towards solar being one of the most effective, but I agree with you in principle.
Well, just as an example, we tend to think about projects, but we could develop a building standard that all buildings need to be all electric. All new construction had to be all electric, because you can substitute the electric energy. And I'm not saying you do that instead of solar, but that could come at relatively little cost and yield a lot of benefit, in tandem with other things. So yeah, I mean, I want to see a discrete project, but I just want to make sure if we have limited dollars and time, which things yield the most benefit. So
Glenn, go ahead.
I would like to move on to the next part of this process, because we just spent 20 minutes talking about solar.
Yes, sir. Okay, so let's so what I did is sort of did this little projects analysis worksheet, which is the way my brain works, but I'm hoping it'll be helpful for this conversation. So we have the return on investment, which is very broad. We have the strategic objectives, and I would suggest that we consider how many strategic objectives are we hitting, the populations that are included, and so how broadly are we including the populations in the community, and then the stakeholders that are included as we look at that. And I just want to make sure I've got okay, so if we could look, and these are all the projects that we listed. And you remember the policies are just the broad categories of things that we could change. I just added the building standard under solar, but it actually could have fallen under policies just as easily. So just wanted to point that out. So let's look at changing the budgeting process. So taking on a project that would have the internal team probably working with you to amend the budgeting process. I guess to the extent that we feel like maybe, do we think that it hits ROI? Does it give us a return on investment when we do that? Let's kind of talk through that. And maybe just for the sake of timing, let's consider all four if someone wants to kind of talk through whether, and we'll figure out who agrees and disagrees with that. So budgeting process. Does it hit all four? Does it hit two of them?
Go ahead, Chantel.
Yeah, I mean, the budget is a reflection of our values, so it touches on absolutely everything. And that's where I think we should be responsive to what we're hearing and be flexible so that we can actually reflect our values.
Anybody want to add anything to that or disagree? Yeah.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Just have a clarification question. Are we just talking about does it check a box, or to what extent does it check that box?
The latter.
Okay, thank you.
So let's just say kind of like, what is it, ice skating or whatever, this one got all four, but maybe as we go through this, we're going to think that something is a little bit more heavily weighted. So do you want to have that discussion in terms of the budgeting process? Do you see that maybe there's one or more that you don't think it gets as many points for?
I was just curious about how we are going about this process.
Well, I think as imperfect as it is there any one of these projects listed that anyone thinks really rises above the rest?
If
Well,
you don't mind, let's go down. Are we kind of like narrowing at this point, Heather?
Yeah, we are. We're trying to get it down to, we need to get it down to 3. They need to involve staff. So I want to make sure that, Glenn, to your point, you're exactly right. We could say that on every single one.
I'm wondering if we go down the line then and say, maybe pick your top 4 or 5, and then we can narrow down to 3. I don't know. What do you think? I'm just thinking through a process.
I agree.
Ranked choice voting sounds awesome.
I see head nods. Heather, I don't want to interfere, but
Love it. No, I love it.
Mayor Smith, you've been very quiet. Would you like to chime in here a little bit? Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
Yep, sorry. Yeah, I mean, for the sense of time, I mean, we could debate this for forever. So yeah, I think if maybe we could get it to 5 and then maybe to 3. I mean, just because something's on here and it might not make the 3, it's not going to go away. I mean, it's going to be something we're always going to want to talk about. So, just given our limited time and our awkward year we're having. So that's kind of my 2 cents worth.
Would you want to lead the charge and pick your top 5?
I could do that.
Go for it.
Well,
Why
do we need to do this? I guess that's my question.
Ah,
Is this even worth our doing? I'm kind of resonating with Glenn here tonight, on the process. Do we have to have only 3 up there? And can we live with what we've got and be looking at each of those things as we move forward?
Motion for each counselor to pick their top 3.
I'll second that.
Can I just say one thing that, it seems to me, it's like, we ought to stipulate, for example, that our policy making and budgetary stuff should be driven towards the goals. So to have that as part of a goal is a little bit redundant. I have emphasized it, but I don't think it needs to be there because unless I'm mistaken, do we share the consensus that our budgetary process should be goal driven? And if we can stipulate that, then it doesn't need to be a thing up there. Policies doesn't need to be a thing because those are the tools. What tools do we have? We have legislation and we have our operations and budgeting. Those are the tools we have. So if we can stipulate that those need to be our tools, then we can focus on, do we want to drive those towards renewable energy or housing or whatever,
Okay.
Can I'd like to agree with David there and also suggest that I feel like we probably all think COVID response is requisite no matter what, that we should just have that as automatic and then list our 3 goals.
So we're going to remove the first 2.
Glenn, go ahead.
I think that's really interesting that do we all think that the COVID-19 response is the most important thing? I mean, have we reached that consensus?
I'm asking, but I don't even think it's like a goal. It's something we have to deal with. We're dealing with right now, and it's likely going to get worse. I don't think there's a way that staff could ever stop working on it. I don't think there's a way we could, unless we're going to chalk our responsibilities, to not work with other groups on making the best decisions for the city. But I'd like to hear from everybody else.
Yeah, I think Jason's exactly right. We're going to have to keep dealing with COVID-19 no matter what we're doing. So whether we like it or not, it's going to be a priority that's out there that we're just going to have to do. And it's just a matter of what things it's going to knock out of the way as we go. Hopefully we don't get any worse than we are now. So I kind of agree with that it's just going to happen.
Chantel, did you want to share a thought too?
Yeah, along the same lines as Mike and Jason, that it's, I mean, I look at COVID as just a magnification of all the inequity and sustainability problems that were already present in our society. So COVID is just our society on fire. So we just need to, we need to deal with the root issues.
And Glenn, go ahead.
Since I was trying to respect the process and it failed me, I'm just going to start talking about stuff that I want to talk about moving forward. But
Awesome.
COVID-19 is something that we're just going to have to deal with. So I think that should just be taken off. We have to deal with it. Budgeting process changes and strategic planning and management is something that should have been in our values from years ago. And I figured that was what we were supposed to be doing. I also think that should be gone. So that being said, police and community relations, housing, and economic health are my votes.
Thank you, Glenn. Who would like to go next, perhaps? All right, Mr. Snavely.
Sure, if we take those off and understand that they're important, I would put housing, solar, alternative. Now I can't see because this
I'm
is,
sorry, that's me. Okay.
that's okay. So housing, solar, alt, energy, and economic health.
Thank you. I see Jason. Mr. Bracken, go ahead.
Housing, solar, and police and community relations. And sorry, Glenn, Jessica had asked us earlier to speak up because I wasn't sure she could see all the hands. I didn't want to cut you off, so I apologize for that.
Chantel.
I guess I'm struggling a little bit with the police relations because I look at it as in two different ways. I think that we're talking about equity overall, which should apply to absolutely everything. And I don't think the police are the only inequitable part about our city and our society. And I also don't, if that does not become one of the top three, that does not mean that we should not be focusing on it. So I'm very, like what Bill was saying earlier, this worries me with how we're voting, that this is giving some type of permission to ignore very pertinent issues that impact a lot of people. I'm really worried about that. I would vote like Jason did. I would say solar, housing, and I struggle to say police and community relations because I feel like it should just say equity across the board. But those are my three.
Can I just because I think this is a valid, I mean, having serious concerns, I think is something we want to take a pause here. As I understand it, this list this is only going to be the top three that we're picking to engage with the city staff with specifically, but does not mean we won't be addressing it at all. But number two, I think to your point, Chantel, I think from what I heard from the very beginning, there are two key values that COVID-19 has forced to the top of the list. It's the whole list of values still exist, but innovation and equity, or social justice, actually justice was discussed. Those are now, and you might want to take a look at all of these through those lenses, to your point, that is a value that should be infused throughout, and we can go look. But raising the issue of police and community relations, is that value is actually being looked at more specifically in the context of police and community relations, from my understanding. So maybe housing, social justice and housing is all right, but maybe in this particular thing, police and community relations, I'm sorry. Yes, I see lots of hands, Jessica.
Yep, we'll start with, I saw Chantel's first, and then we'll do Glenn.
And yeah, I totally get what you're saying, Heather. It's just my 3 years on council, I've been told that if things aren't specifically delineated in the strategic planning, that we cannot talk about it until the following year. So I want to
Got
make
it.
sure that we have a consensus that that is not the case
Oops.
going forward. And I would feel much at ease.
Okay, that makes thank you for that. Okay.
I agree with Chantel 100%.
Same here.
Glenn, did you want to share your thoughts? You had your hand up.
Since I'm the individual that came up with that police and community relations criteria, I would like to reword that to make it fit a little better with the values. And I would like to just say community and social services.
In that case, I'll move my vote from economic health to that. And I just want to say that part of that is because these are for projects, not for values. And I think sometimes we mix those things up. But I can see projects in each of those areas. And I agree with Chantel, and it needs to be said again, just because they're not on this list doesn't mean we can't talk about it, or we can't bring something up that happens to be important at the time. It's just that these are the things we want to focus on and really try to get done.
Jason, go ahead.
All right, I just wanted to agree with Bill. I like that it's encompassing more now, but let's not lose our focus on that as one of the major projects underneath it. I don't want us to look at it so broadly now that we forget that originally it was about police and community relations, at least as a major target. That's all.
And then, Edna and David, did you guys want to chime in? And then Mayor Smith, I think we need to hear from you too. Let's go with David. Go ahead.
So it's hard for me to put things in the categories. I'm going to speak from the things that I'm most worried about, that I feel like are our greatest threats. You know, I think that we face kind of a really serious economic threat in our community. And I think it has to be a priority. It's going to be for the next 3 years. So I don't know, you know, whether that falls. I mean, to me, I would say merge economic health and sustainable growth. Like, I can't see how I'm not going to be worried about our economy for the next 2 years plus. And so then the next thing I worry about is sustainability. I really worry about our planet. And I think that solar energy is great, but it doesn't encompass, when I look at where all of our emissions come from, you know, the electrical purchasing is just one piece of it. You know, there's all these other things. So, you know, I guess I would maybe put sustainable, if we could call it sustainable energy or something, I would put my vote with that. But that doesn't mean so. I mean, I think we should pursue solar, but I think we should also pursue other things. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, so and then I guess the third thing would be housing. That it's just more like an equity. If I look at problems that we know are pressing problems, housing is a pressing, you know, near and present danger problem in Oxford, as is our economic collapse, and I think sustainability. So I guess I would put housing there. No offense, I feel like the policing issues we have are really, really, really important. But when in terms of things that pose existential threat to the greatest number of people, you know, sustainability, economics, and housing are the biggest things for me.
Sustainability, economics.
I know
Thank
I
you.
already talked, but I don't think my votes were counted.
Oh, well, let's hear him again. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Okay, community and social services, like what Jason said, which includes policing, that should not be swept under the rug. Housing and solar energy.
I'm sorry about that.
And Edna?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think that the economic health is primary, unfortunately. You know, if we don't, if we don't have a healthy economy, we don't have a town at all. So that actually, unfortunately, is primary. But I see economic health as part of sustainable growth, and I'd really like to see those two things merged. Can't we have sustainable growth that is economically healthy? The
Do,
that would include housing somehow. In order to be economically healthy, we also have to have housing issues solved.
can I ask, I'm sorry, because I want to make sure we clear this up. So I can't remember who mentioned economic health, but when I scrolled back up, there wasn't a lot to it. So do we want to combine economic health with sustainability? Is that what we meant when we said economic health?
So I'm the guy that made the economic health thing up.
Okay.
And I actually considered back when we had this first discussion in what was that, February, March, something like that,
Yeah.
that sustainability would be economically sustainability. So when they talk about sustained growth and economic health, I'm perfectly fine with combining those two.
Perfect. Well, let me make that change. And thank you. And I'm sorry I didn't catch that earlier. I wish I had done that and we wouldn't have that there. Okay. So now let me go back down here, and so we're going to keep it sustainable economic growth. Is that okay? Or just sustainable growth?
Well, whatever it is, I mean, it's, our economic health is primary. So, you know, we don't have a town if we don't have an economy that's workable. So that's primary. And you know, community and social services are also primary. So I put that. I would vote for that, and I would also vote for uh, varieties of housing.
Got it. Thank you.
Heather, can you just remind me, you just said there wasn't a whole lot to economic health. What were the specific tangible projects underneath economic health that we keep voting for? Because it makes it sound like the rest of us are against economic health.
Actually, I'm glad Glenn mentioned that he was the one who said it. So when we were trying to combine them all, the ones that seem similar, economic health was just by itself, sustaining the economic health of the city. Thank you, Glenn.
I just wanted to add, no one requested me bringing up points underneath my project ideas, so I did not provide any. So that question is, I mean, I can provide some if you want me to now, but that's why I didn't provide any at the time. I'm trying to respect the time that we only have an hour left. Wanted to make sure that we had enough time to go through this process.
Thank you.
Well, it's like I'm sorry, it's like if we voted for peace and love, what does that mean? You know, what project, we're allocating the budget. So whenever we're voting for economic health, what part of the budget are we allocating? Like, what project do you want to do?
Because it sounds more like a general value rather than a project.
And the most important part of that to me was actually something that I thought fell under COVID response, which is, you know, hopefully we get stimulus and we make these plans to sort of handle it. And so that's why I wasn't voting for that.
But this is
Well,
where
I think I'm sorry, David, go ahead. Okay, well, I mean, I think economic health is broader than that. I mean, it also includes things like, you know, what are we going to do about the uptown businesses, the empty buildings? You know, it includes a lot of things. I mean, you could define it as a value, but I think it requires some action on our part. Sorry, David.
No, yeah, and just if I could real quickly, it's again, we're thinking projects, but we're going to be facing choices. The Enjoy Oxford is dependent on an income stream that has disappeared. So do we find a way to support that? It may not be a project, but it may be a choice we're going to have to make in upcoming months. And if we could define it as a priority, it'll be a budgetary thing. So I'm sorry.
Well, I propose we have 4 and then move on.
And Glenn, I've seen your hand raised. Did you want to share?
No,
Okay.
Second
I-
what Bill said.
Okay.
And then I don't think, Mayor Smith, I'm sorry, but did you get a chance to share? I mean, you were at the beginning and then we stopped and we kind of came back to it. So looping
Right,
you back
right.
in.
I kind of agree with where Vice Mayor Snavely's coming at, is I think we could probably make 4 projects work, and it seems like, all mine are going to fall within those 4. So I think if everybody's not opposed to it, we can just go with the 4 we've got.
Is that good?
Sounds great to me.
Yes.
Okay. So working with community and social services. What we're going to do next is to let's look at community and social services. So this is not yet a project, as we keep talking about. And again, this is linking to the staff. So this is time that the staff is going to spend on a specific item that, again, I just want to go back, and I don't want to make anybody sick by scrolling too fast, but remember, we're trying to get to the place where we're asking staff to do something that's going to result in a, daily, weekly, monthly tasks potentially for them. That was the idea, was that we would pick a handful. We're going to go with 4 projects that the staff is going to spend time on to help hit those strategic objectives that you set. So going back to community and social services, when we look at what kind of a project that's going to look like, what do we have in mind?
I
John?
want to see police social workers.
I'm sorry?
I would like to see police social workers. I have another one if you would
Oh,
like
go
to
ahead,
entertain
Glenn.
it.
Go ahead, Glenn.
I would also like to pass some legislation that directly ties our Police Community Relations and Review Commission to various actions of our police officers.
Can you say that once more? I'm sorry.
Pass legislation that directly ties just say PCRRC to officers' standards.
Okay.
Okay. I saw Chantel's hand and I think I saw Jason's hand.
I mean, it's very timely because we're going to have this, this letter read to us from Black Lives Matter in combination with a bunch of other social organizations and political organizations tomorrow night at the meeting. So whatever it is that the advocacy groups are asking for is what I would support. And I'm also curious about this, going back to the same thing. If it's not listed, are we just giving ideas so that staff could follow up on it? Like if we don't list it on this, are we not going to follow up on it if it comes up later? I just want to make sure that, are we tied to this list, or what are we doing with this list?
I can't see Doug, and I apologize. I just want to be this. My understanding is these are a list 3 to 4 projects that staff will work on. But I'm creating a parking lot, and we'll have it as part of your report from this meeting, that these are all things that you said were important and needed to be addressed.
Well, let me just chime in, Heather.
Yeah.
We're having very good discussion. I'm doing more listening than talking, which is probably unusual for me. But I want to, I want to give council the opportunity. I want to hear what each one is thinking. And then as a group, obviously any organization needs to focus their time and resources. I know in the report that was issued in February, it talked about council goals and departmental goals not being aligned. I think, our alignment is getting closer, but there are, I'm hearing some new ideas that, I think it's fair to say that we haven't spent much time on. So my goal is to kind of say, here's some really important things we want you to do now. But, when we talk about police community relations, we have the PCRRC, and I know council's familiar. We've been working very closely with them long before Black Lives Matter, dealing with many of the issues that have come up just recently in the national media. Now, does that mean we rest on our laurels? No. There's more things we want to do. I mean, the letter that we're getting from Black Lives Matter, which talked about collecting data on stops, we've had that discussion in PCRRC for several meetings, and we're doing our best to do that. So, I'm happy to say I'm not hearing a lot of, shall we say, misalignment, but, I'm still concerned. I want to make sure that we're doing the things that the council's majority feels is a priority. And so hopefully that's a helpful comment for you.
Very helpful.
Okay, can I speak?
There.
I don't know who's moderating.
Yeah, go ahead.
If it's okay with Glenn, I'd rather it just said social workers or, social work staff or something like that. And then we can have a debate and understand whether they should be police or non-police. Okay, thank you.
I concur with that completely.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Chantel?
I
Go ahead.
just realized that what I said wasn't added as a bullet to whatever the Black Lives Matter and other advocacy groups propose tomorrow, I think is worthwhile to listen to, and we should take into account. And just like what Doug said, like, that's so awesome that we have an oversight committee for the police. That's so great. So let's just keep going. There's so much more we can do, and there's a lot of different ways we can make the complaint process more transparent and easy, that you don't need an affidavit or a notarized signature or whatever to have a complaint against the police. So I think that we have a lot to learn from advocacy groups.
Is it, and I want to make sure I get this right, is it listen to and take into account the letter itself? No, please, I'd like to make it just the way you want, and I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Glenn?
To Chantel's point, my second bullet point does take into account the stuff that you're going to hear tomorrow. Actually, both of those bullet points did, but I'm not trying to tie what we're doing to another group outside of what we're doing at an executive level.
Okay. So is there a second bullet, Glenn, that you'd like to?
The two bullets that I proposed actually encompass what more than likely is going to be in that letter.
Okay, so these, okay, I see. These
unofficially, more than likely what's going to be in that letter, those two bullet points encompass. I'm not trying to be granular at this point because that's not where we're at. That's where the task portion of this is, if I understand the process correctly. So that's why I said what I said and how I said it, besides the police social worker. And that's why I'm totally in agreement with what Mr. Snavely said. And why don't you just say social worker staff?
Okay. All right. So we have our first project. How about housing?
But did I not understand from what Glenn said that the last line, listen to and take into account the Black Lives Matter letter, is already subsumed under the first two comments and doesn't need to be there. Isn't that what you just said, Glenn?
I'm not going to say that Chantel's suggestion is not without merit, but what I'm saying is that what we hear tomorrow will more than likely be encompassed in those 2 bullet points.
Heather, did you want to move on to housing?
Sure. Okay, so let's come up with a project for housing or a couple of a bullet or 2.
Bill?
See if I'm unmuted. Okay. So we had talked about, and maybe the best way to put it would be to listen to, take into account Housing Advisory Commission, HAC recommendations on, yeah, just leave it there.
Okay.
Because that includes things like the in lieu of fees, lodging tax, et cetera.
Okay.
Are there others who want to speak to the housing? Jason?
Yeah, I would love to see, as mentioned, some sort of shelter available, cold shelter, short-term shelter, something like that for those who have nothing above their heads and things are about to get worse.
So this is a project to create an additional shelter option.
Yeah, build or facilitate a shelter in town.
Okay.
With
Build or facilitate. Got it. I'm just catching up to what you said. Huh. Okay.
No worries.
Thank you. Anything else on housing?
If I could jump in, we need to identify revenue streams to support housing activities by the city of Oxford. And that is itself an activity that we need to figure out, where does that money, how other communities do it? And then the second part is, how can we use that money and spend it meaningfully? And I think that's where we've been stuck for so long. So, I think that and so I think those are the 2 things. We can figure out how to bring money in, whether it's in lieu of fees or whether it's CDBG money, and then who will help us spend it and how will we spend it. Obviously I think the RFP is got to be a continued priority. That's going to take time, and there's a way we can directly move the needle on housing. So I hope that remains really a high priority for us, is really keeping our eye on how do we make the most out of those 47 acres. One comment is that I think there's a parallelism. Like, I think maybe all of them should have a bullet that says work with the relevant board and commission. So, the first one should have said, Black Lives Matter is wonderful, but the PCRRC are people. So like, maybe they're not maybe we're not going to have a bullet for everyone, like, listen to these people. Like, we're going to have to partner with these boards and groups that already exist and leverage them. So I think all of these things are going to have
That's good.
because that's in part the tasking, because it's not just staff. It's like, who should staff work with to make this happen? In this bullet, it's the HAC and community development. So
I was just using that because they were already putting out some recommendations, and I thought it would be a shorthand to get to the things that you just added.
Okay, that's very helpful. All right.
That's what I was actually waiting to say. I appreciate your candor, Bill.
Okay. All right. Shall we move on to the next, which would be solar and alternative energy?
Chantel, go ahead.
I would ask for the staff to advertise for bids for a Solarize Oxford, so that we could have discounted solar panels for homeowners as one project, and then allocate money for marketing to market to advertise for the project itself. So that is something that would not be, again, taking up a lot of city funds for one project. And then the other one would be, I would like Doug to run with the solar array project idea. You obviously had it all mapped out, so go for it. And is this only for solar? I'll stop there. Or you can stop me if this is incorrect or the wrong place, but if we are looking at methane capture, I would want the commercial composting for food scraps and organic material to expand. I don't know what that means, but as far as what is financially feasible at this point in time, but at least the continuation of it, and then figuring out how ways to capture methane more in the future.
Then I saw David next.
So this is a two-parter. One is, I think we need to devote a lot of energy to making sure we get good inventories in the next year. And that it takes time, it takes energy. We have a municipal scale inventory, municipal operations, and now we're doing the community. And that will take work to do. But if we have that over the next year, then we can really be guided on what's the best way to invest our dollars to drive down emissions. This is where, again, I'm a little with Edna, I think solar could be the right thing. And I think we should start talking utility scale solar with Miami, because I think they're going to be in the same position we're in. But I think we need to, let's also really devote energy to inventorying so that we can make the best decisions with limited resources.
And then, Edna, go ahead.
We should be thinking in this regard about alternate forms of transportation, so that we already are, we're just going to continue the Oats Trail, for instance, working with the Butler County transportation system and the Amtrak station. In other words, working on ways that transportation, that we're not so dependent on cars, that there are other ways for people in our community to be connected to the big cities in our region, and to be more connected with that doesn't depend on cars. Yeah.
Well, and I'll just jump in that we don't have an inventory, but nationally in the United States, 29% of emissions are from transportation. So, I think that's why I think we need to look at transportation because it's going to be a big piece of our emissions here. So I agree with.
Is it safe to say that that I could put the methane, food scraps, and transportation all under the create a good inventory? Or are we really thinking that
The inventory, if I may, I think he means the greenhouse gas inventory that we're conducting. There's both a nationality one and a community one. Am I right, David?
Yeah, really what I'm talking about is climate action planning, that we do an inventory of emissions and then we identify which strategies are going to help us drive them down. Gotcha. So yeah, the inventory is the first step, but I think we need to look at the actions also in the next year. And we can guess what they would be: transportation, electricity.
Awesome. Oops. All right. Anything else for solar alternative energy?
I'm going to just jump in. Bill raised this before, even at the last inventory. I think we need to look at all electric buildings. And I think that's going to be, so I think this is more for community development and our building code. Like if we can move to all electric buildings and we can supply all our buildings with renewable electricity, you can get heating, cooling, cooking to zero. So that's a regulatory thing I hope we look at.
Anything else? All right, well, we can, sorry, we'll go back up to our list. We have economic health and sustainable growth. Anyone have specifics here?
Go ahead, Glenn.
Now this is gonna kind of overlap with housing, but definitely pass legislation regarding transient housing taxing. Also legislation regarding commercial property performance. And continuation of community events that bring people to town to engage with our businesses.
David, I saw your hand.
Well, maybe you can help me out, Jessica, which is I was trying to look back through my email to the CIC priorities because we had this conversation ourselves. And I think that there were a lot of really great goals that came out of CIC, and help me out with those, Glenn and Jessica. I mean, one was
They're in front of my face. Do you want me
great.
to-
Share them with us, please.
It says encourage business startup and provide a supportive business culture, business recruitment and job creation, encourage year-round residency in and around Oxford, and then infrastructure for sustainable growth.
I missed the. What was the
So
third? Okay.
It was residency in and around Oxford.
Ah, gotcha.
So if I could identify a project, I think it's going for and grabbing every stimulus dollar that can possibly be grabbed for the city of Oxford. And I think that's going to take energy, but I think we have to be there to, if we can if we can grab money for infrastructure, if we can grab stimulus dollars, we just really need to help get our community through this, and hopefully with some infrastructure afterwards that will help us do all these things. And I would just jump back to this about the tax that Glenn, we have to support Enjoy Oxford through this time because they're going to be really vulnerable, but we need them now more than ever. So like supporting and Enjoy Oxford is to me key.
That was my third bullet point. I mean, basically is just making sure that they stay here and they grow.
So while we're on this, the last thing I'll say is that I'm also worried about our own fiscal health as a city, and that I'm not sure that our base of support is as broad as it needs to be. We're super dependent on income taxes from one big employer. And so I think fiscal health means I think our economy needs to be broader and our fiscal base needs to be broader. Anyway, that's just a thought that I'm having.
I'd like to see us add how that we will work to eliminate the empty storefronts in Oxford, whether that means legislation that fines them or that fines businesses for leaving storefronts empty. That's one solution, and I think that's something we should be looking into, and I would like to see that happen. Maybe there are other incentives that we can think of, but this is a blight on our community, and it drains our economic health, and it gives our city a look that doesn't match the intention that we would like to see. In addition, of course, one of the things in our city is that we want to preserve the historic character. So we also want to work with HAPC, which is the Historic and Architectural Preservation Commission, on making sure that we are able to preserve the buildings that represent the character of this town.
I'd like to follow up on that if I could, Edna. So the second bullet point that I had there, I shouldn't have narrowed it by saying pass legislation. I probably also shouldn't have put pass legislation on that first bullet point, but I just want to say ensure commercial property performance for the second bullet point,
Oh, got it. Okay.
which I believe addresses your elimination addresses the elimination of empty storefronts and includes incentives and other things like that. Same with the transient housing tax. Now, like, I don't know how to change that one. I mean, that just needs to be done. Those guys are sitting there in that gray area, and we need to make sure that they contribute to the city. So I guess we got to leave that one alone.
Okay. Well, it seems like you've done a really nice job of at least bringing, we've got a parking lot of the things that we still are going to focus on. And I would say that that parking lot also is now going to include the policies and diversity and vibrancy. So I'm going to add that here for you. Which may have even gotten addressed through some of those things. So we have our 4 top areas and the details about what we want to see done under each one of those. And so, you know, the last piece of this is something that's going to have to happen. And I think it's a good tie as you start to engage with the internal city staff or the town staff, is to say, okay, for each one of these, we need to consider each of these pieces together. And so that acknowledges that we are aware of the authorizing environment and whether there's public value. And, you know, as it relates to the capacity of the internal team to actually assist and deliver, and time, talent, and, you know, potentially parts of the budget, what are we going to need to make that happen? And each one of these goes into an actual action plan with steps that needs to happen. And so, like I say, I have a really good tool I can share with you to use for that. But those conversations are going to need to probably be some of your next steps. So let me take a pause there, and I guess anything from anyone? Thoughts, comments, questions before we start to wrap up?
Well, I guess I'll just jump in, is that what I would love to see is that can we create a checklist like you have, that then, for example, that I can see, you know, when we consider, do we spend time on new legislation, how many of those boxes does it check? If we just did that kind of thing, and whether it's a budget request, I would love that. To me would be a tangible outcome of this, which is this is the checklist, and see, this thing hits 5 dots across the thing. We really should do this. Then I would know that this has translated into decision making.
Maybe we're done.
Yeah, so I mean, that's going to be that as you look at each one of these things, like I say, that there's probably other different tools you can use, but it sounds like that's a very quick go and do with this current budgeting process. But then for the broader picture of, again, we're trying to build in some processes that'll tie together the, you know, overarching goals, you know, what Doug had talked about earlier, making sure that council goals and department goals get aligned. That's where these top project ideas kind of go into action plans. And then you can ask some of these questions as part of however you structure that next step. And I guess that might be a question I have for you is, what is the next step in terms of starting to work in earnest against these projects?
Doug or Mayor Smith, I don't know if you want to chime in or. I
To
don't know
jump
what
in,
you're- Heather.
we'll compile what we've done today for sure. And then either, schedule work sessions as needed with the various committees, or listen to the various committees. And then the things for staff, give those to staff to work on. So those are just some of the directions we can go.
Yeah, Heather, I'll look forward to getting your PowerPoint with your additional information. I've been trying to keep notes. You're much faster than I am, and yours is legible in mine. But yeah, we'll talk tomorrow because I'm anxious to get the final report with this PowerPoint, and I'm going to meet with staff. They've been watching this whole process tonight. And I'll need to get their feedback. We all know we've got a lot of projects we're working on, and we've been hit with COVID-19. And yes, it has taken a priority because it must. But I value their input because I'm a manager and I get things done through and with people, and so give us some time to digest this information and come back to City Council then.
Well, awesome. And like I say, this next step slide is a really good set of questions for the internal team to look at,
Thank
what,
you.
so, all right. Well, with that,
I just want to add
Glenn.
one thing.
Please.
Can we set up quarterly work sessions to check in on this?
Sure, we can. We can do whatever council wants.
And
Yeah, thank you, Glenn.
And could I also ask that we start thinking about how we're going to do a comp plan revision in 2021, even if COVID doesn't abate like we hope it will? I think all of this has been so wonderful, but I think we need to engage
Has to be done.
on our goals. And I think it has to happen in 2021 regardless. So I think thinking about that, budgeting for that, having a workflow for how we're going to do it, going into 2021, I think we just got to start thinking about it.
David, sure we do, and we recognize that. We've talked about it, and it's going to be in the CIP. I don't know if we'll be able to keep it there because we're still trying to figure out what our situation is going to be for next year. Each month that goes by, we get a better handle on it, but it's so very important. And we may have to scrap some other possible capital projects to move forward with it, but it'll be an update. And Sam has a lot of great ideas on how we can move forward with that. As you all know, our budget, we're a people-centered organization. When I worked for Dayton Power and Light, it was a capital-intensive organization as opposed to a city or any social service agency where it's labor-intensive. 70% of our budget goes for personnel services and in the general fund. And so, assuming we don't want to lay off anybody, the only part that's discretionary would probably be the capital project. So we'll talk more about that as we move forward with the process. But I want to thank all of you for this valuable input tonight. And like I said, give us a little time to digest it and get input from staff. And, once we get the report back from Heather, I'll share that with you immediately.
awesome.
If nobody objects, I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Mr. City Manager, will you call the roll so we may adjourn?
Yeah, let me get my list of folks here. All righty. Mr. Stagley,
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Prethridge,
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes, sir.
Ms. Souther,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. That was great. We had some of the